This is a Learn recording for Unit 1, Basics of Science, Lessons, Variable and Constant Factors, and the Scientific Method. There are 2 lessons combined into this recording. Investigations. Scientists learn new information about the natural world by performing investigations, which can be done in many different ways. Scientific methods. An organized set of investigation procedures is called a scientific method. There are 5 main steps in the scientific method. Steps of the scientific method. Step 1, observations. Step 2, hypothesis. Step 3, experiment. Step 4, results. Step 5, conclusion. Step 1, observations. Scientific investigations begin when someone observes an event in nature and wonders why or how it occurs. Then the question of why or how is the problem. That was very unusual. How did that happen? Or this isn't working. I wonder why. Step 2, hypothesis. A hypothesis is a possible explanation for a problem using what you know and what you observe. For example, if I add fertilizer to my garden, then my plants will grow faster. That is a hypothesis. Step 3, experiment. To test your hypothesis, perform an experiment. An experiment tests the effect of one thing on another using controlled conditions. Controlled and uncontrolled experiments. In an uncontrolled experiment, there are many factors you cannot control or keep constant. This is not ideal, but sometimes it is your only option. A controlled experiment tests the effect of only one dependent variable using controlled conditions. This is always preferred and always your best option. A controlled experiment is always preferred to test your hypothesis, and a controlled experiment has only one variable. Uncontrolled experiments have factors you can't control, but sometimes this is your only option. If you are conducting an experiment involving the human body, you will have an uncontrolled experiment because you cannot keep many parts of the body constant while you are testing another area. You cannot tell every person in your experiment to eat exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, chew each piece of food the same way, the same number of times, to swallow the same way, to go to the bathroom in the same moment of every day. You cannot control every aspect of every person's body. So if you had an experiment involving the human body, it would be uncontrolled. Factors in the experiment. All the possible parts of an experiment or observation are called factors. Factors include all the constants and variables in the experiment. A factor that does not change when other variables change is called a constant. You might set up 4 trials using the same soil type and kind of plant for an experiment. If you give the same type of soil for every plant, the type of soil is a constant. If you use the same kind of plant in every trial of the experiment, the kind of plant is a constant. If each plant is given the same amount of sunlight and water and is kept at the same temperature, these are constants. A variable is a quantity that can have more than a single value. You might set up an experiment to determine which of 3 fertilizers helps plants to grow the biggest. Fertilizer type would be a variable. Possible factors include plant type, amount of sunlight, amount of water, room temperature, type of soil, and type of fertilizer. The height the plant grew would be a variable that would vary based on each plant. In this experiment, the amount of growth for each plant is the dependent variable because its value changes according to the changes in other variables. The dependent variable is what you measure in your results. It's what you measure throughout the experiment. You don't know the value for the dependent variable until your experiment is through. The variable you change to see how it will affect the dependent variable is called the independent variable. Fertilizer type is the independent variable. You choose the levels for your independent variable. You decide which fertilizer types you are going to use in your experiment. You get to make that choice. You have control over the independent variable. Step 4, results. Organize your observations and the results of the experiment into easy-to-read tables and graphs. The results section contains tables and graphs. In your results section, you look at your data from the experiment and you interpret it. Overall, what does it mean? If the data is not organized well, you may make the wrong conclusion. In the results section, you will have your tables of data and graphs. Step 5, conclusion. In your step 5 conclusion, you will compare the results you found with your original question and hypothesis. Do they match? Do your results Support your hypothesis, what your answer to your original question was. If they match, then your conclusion is your hypothesis is correct. Your hypothesis is supported. If they don't match, then your conclusion is your hypothesis is not supported. Your hypothesis is not correct. That is your conclusion to the Learn recording for the scientific method lesson and the variable and constant factors lesson. Try some practice questions to check your understanding.